Hey, so welcome to a regular showing of my signature presentation that I call With Democrats, Things Get Better. I've been doing this presentation in some form or another, going back all the way back to 2017. So this is sort of the great-great-grandchild of the original presentation. Every time I present it, it's new and fresh. There's all the data as best I can is up to date. And also we add new insights as we learn more about our wonderful political system in the two parties. The basic premise of this presentation, sorry, jumped ahead. Okay, the basic premise of this presentation is as follows, and I want to just say before I get into it, there are just some basic foundational things about the current political moment that I want to cover today. That Joe Biden has been a good president, the country's better off, the Democratic Party is strong, and we keep winning elections all across the country, including this week in Orlando, Florida. They have Trump, who is the most unfit person to run for president in our history, and a politics MAGA, which keeps losing elections in 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2023. And in every way possible, I would much rather be us than them. And I just want to get that out of the way because now we're gonna go into the data. This presentation really is a sort of a meditation on American politics since 1989. My first political race was in the late 1980s. This also covers the span of my life in American politics, and really is a reflection upon what I've seen and some of the things that I've learned along the way. And the most important thing that I can probably convey to you is just how much the world has changed since 1989. When the Cold War ended, the Berlin Wall fell, communism in theory ended, right? The communist powers ended, and this new age of globalization began, where there was an attempt to take the American system that had been in place and extend it to the rest of the world. This really has been the defining trend, or the defining evolution of our global systems in 1989. And during that time, so much has changed, right? We have seen the arrival of the internet and COVID and climate change. You can go down your list of things, AI now, right? There's been enormous changes that have been happening in America and around the world. And I think that one of the ways that I'd like to present, to sort of postulate today or posit, is that I think it's important to try to evaluate how the two parties have performed against all of these dramatic changes. I mean, to me, 1989 was a before and after period, where there was, where there was a very different global economy, very different global architecture. And post 1989, we've been in this relentless effort to try to pull everybody into an American-led global order. And the question is, how the two parties, in my view, done in regard to that? And we can start with, I'm sorry, I'm on a different computer than I'm normally on, and so just bear with me here. Let me go back here. Sorry, I'm not going to use this computer next time. So here's what's happened during that period. We've had now 16 years of 3 Republican presidents and 19 years of 3 Democratic presidents. And what we've seen again and again and again is that with Democrats, we get growth, strong growth, the deficit comes down, the market goes up, and America moves forward. And under Republicans, the exact opposite happens. We have recession, higher deficits, and American decline. And that this really is, to me, this fundamental contrast and understanding of what has happened during this period since 1989. And you can see, that the Republicans have only averaged 10,000 jobs created per month over 16 years. It's an anemic record, and so much that we have to run on as Democrats. This is that slide that goes into jobs per month. And you can see that Biden has averaged more than 40 times jobs created per month than the Republicans when they were in power. And even the Clinton and Obama, far greater, right? 117-fold what the Republicans averaged. And what I just want to put that in perspective is that we're creating 200,000 to 300,000 jobs a month. That's pretty typical now in American history. Republicans created 120,000 jobs a year for 16 years. which is more than is typical in a month. And so their performance, their economic performance during this period, in this age of globalization, has been disappointing, we can say, at the very least. And you can see it. I'm going to show you now a bunch of slides that are going to sort of show you what's happened. That the unemployment rate when Republicans were in power went up. When the unemployment rate when Democrats were in power has gone down substantially. This to me is the one slide, if every Democrat could share this through all of their networks and their friends, and this is widely available on the Hopium Chronicle site, is that there have been now altogether 50 million jobs created net in America since 1989. And 48 million of those, 96%, have been created under Democratic presidents, essentially all of them. And this contrast between our good works and our leaving the country better than we found it, and their repeated struggle, and now something beyond struggle, right? The threat and danger that they've become is really critical and material to understand where we are today in American politics. GDP growth is now, Biden has averaged per year about 3 times what Trump did during his presidency. We've had very strong, robust growth throughout the Biden presidency. And we also know that what's happened with the stock market since 1989. This is a thing that we need to be talking about more, in my view, as Democrats, which is the market now. The Dow has gone up over 18-fold since 1989. There's been a huge explosion of wealth because our companies were well positioned to take advantage of the world going from 1 billion or 2 billion customers to 7 to 8 billion. We have the most profitable and successful companies in the entire world. We dominate virtually every industry that exists. And it's really been an extraordinary performance by the United States and our business leaders and our companies and our workers during this period. There's been enormous wealth created, historic wealth. More wealth has been created in America since 1989 than any period in our history. And this is how the market has grown. I mean, not only have we been the party of job growth and low unemployment, right? We've also been the party of booming stock markets. Biden's got a little work to do here. Obviously, we've seen the Dow, break records in the last few weeks, and the S&P is about to break records as well. But we've come, we have been far more responsible for the growth and prosperity of America than Republicans during this period. And I wanted to spend a minute on this slide. I think this is important because there is this myth that out there that American workers have fallen behind during this period and that things are worse today for American workers. And that's just not true, right? I mean, this is a slide that I downloaded it today. This is the latest slide from the Census Bureau, showing median income growth in all the various components of American society. And if you notice on the bottom, Black and Hispanic have, continued to do very well in recent years, while there's been some fallback. This only goes through 2022. If we had 2023 numbers, these would be back very significantly back on the upswing here, right? And so you can see that the story of America is that we've gotten much more prosperous, and people who own stocks and had real estate have gotten really prosperous. But the American people have also prospered too. And we can be able to have both of these things in our mind at the same time. The rate of growth of income growth is not kept up with the stock market going up 18-fold, but it's gone up, and people are more prosperous today in America than they've ever been. And this is really important as sort of a foundational understanding of Hopium. And also on the deficit, which is something we debate every day now in Washington because the Republicans have a horrendous fiscal track record. The deficit's gone up every time under the last 3 Republican presidents, and it's gone down substantially under the last 3 Democratic presidents, including under Biden. The deficit today is trillions less than when Biden came to office. And this is really important to recognize, is that if you're looking for the party of fiscal responsibility, you need to be looking to us, the Democratic Party. And this is an example of, this is a little bit hard to read, I guess, but what you saw here on the debt and the deficit, the annual deficit, is that it stayed pretty constant. And then Reagan came, and you started seeing it increasing dramatically because of Republican tax cuts. Clinton came in, raised taxes, the economy boomed. We actually got to surpluses under the Clinton administration. And then, of course, a Republican comes in with more tax cuts, the deficit goes way up. Obama then, does his best, inheriting one of the worst recessions in the history of the country, does his best to get it back to a place of something like normal. And then Trump puts it into historically terrible place. this is an important story that we have to learn, because we shouldn't see the discussions around fiscal responsibility, in my view, as Democrats. We've been the party who's been fiscally responsible. And what's so incredible about listening to the Republicans talk about the economy right now is that their basic argument is that we shouldn't be spending money in Ukraine, we should be spending it at home. And then the only thing they're doing is talking about cutting all the investments that Biden has made. I mean, this is a farcical economic argument. And part of my big theory is that the Republican Party is very disconnected from modern economics, because a lot of their domestic offering is really about denying undeserving, in their mind, undeserving people stuff. And it isn't driven by actual economics. The Democratic Party has been the party of capitalism and growth and economic opportunity and fiscal responsibility, not the Republican Party. And let's now drill down on some of Biden's specific numbers here, right? Strongest recovery in the G7 from COVID, rather remarkable performance for the United States. The yellow line is us, right? You can see it's up substantially over other large developed economies. We've seen that we have the lowest peacetime unemployment rate in America since World War II. We have the best job market today since the 1960s. If you're a young person trying to find a job, it hasn't been this easy to find a job literally since the Vietnam War. We've seen huge increases in wealth of the United States, particularly with young people. This is very encouraging, and this is only through 2022. And 2023 was a very strong year for the American economy. So these numbers are going to be even bigger. So people are much wealthier today than they were a few years ago. We've had an explosion in very elevated levels of new business formation in recent years. This is something we're still trying to understand, but it's an incredible sign of the health and vitality of the American economy. We also have seen huge increase in entrepreneurship and business ownership of Black and Hispanic Americans in recent years. This is also deeply encouraging and showing, again, the strength, the resilience, the capability of the American economy. We also now have the lowest uninsured rate in the history of the country. If you're a young person looking for work, you are much more likely to have health insurance than you've ever had before. This is a huge accomplishment by the Democrats. The Republicans fought us at every step of the way here, and Donald Trump just recently committed to unravel this policy that has given, that has lowered the uninsured rate down to historically low levels. And it will drop again once we get the data. And this year, it will continue to drop this year. We'll have record, once we get the final 2023 data, we'll have record achievement in that regard. We've also seen a huge explosion because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, and domestic investment in manufacturing plants. This is enormously encouraging, right? These are huge sums of money that are being invested in building manufacturing capacity here at home. This was a central promise of the Biden campaign, and it's actually happening. And this is obviously going to create jobs and prosperity for decades to come. Inflation, which has been the boogeyman here, and the spike that happened in early 2022 happened because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and OPEC raising prices, and food prices going up around the world, and global inflation that came because of COVID and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We had this big spike, but it's come down now to near pre-pandemic levels. We now have many prices are actually really falling, right? Gas is down, mortgages are down, rents have come down. We've seen that stuff start to fall, not just the rate of growth slowing, but prices are falling now. And this is an example of what's happened with food prices, which often come up in my discussions at Hopium Chronicles. We've seen substantial decreases in really important parts of our grocery budget. Groceries only increased in the past 12 months by 1%. And with wages at 5% growth, 4 to 5% growth during that period, someone's actual food budget in real terms has actually decreased in the last year. And this is one of the reasons you're seeing consumer sentiment rise so much, that this part of the inflation that's been very important, I think, is coming down. We're seeing progress here. We've also had lower inflation in the United States than any of these other large economies, another remarkable achievement by the Biden administration. And I wanted to spend a second on this slide because this is data from today. It's the Atlanta Fed's wage tracker. Wage growth is 3-month moving average is 5% wage growth. This is not adjusted for inflation. This is just the raw number, and you can see how historically elevated this is. But with inflation basically down at zero or very close to zero now, the gains that workers are making. This is we have some of the most rapid and significant real wage growth that we've seen in a generation today. And it's happening now month after month after month. This is going to be deeply meaningful for American workers and families in the coming months. We have all these other measures, and we all know that people, the myth is that people are down in the economy. But when you ask people questions about their life satisfaction, their job satisfaction, their income satisfaction, something that has to do with them, and Axios had a poll this week that showed very high ratings on people's personal finances, because I've just shown you this, right? Wealth is up, unemployment's down, inflation's come down. The good news just keeps coming, right? But when you look at these other measures of life satisfaction, job satisfaction, income satisfaction, the numbers are up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? People are pretty happy with their life and work in America today. And part of what's driving this, by the way, is remote work. People who have kids are getting to see their family a little bit more than they used to and go to Little League games and all the things that was always hard if you had a tough commute. This new flexible workforce that we have, remote work, has been a boon to American workers and their happiness. We also know that we've seen huge gains in domestic renewable production here in the United States. It's been really exciting to see, also around the world. And also importantly, we've had, record-breaking domestic oil production. We are more energy independent today than we've been in a very long time, in many decades. This is a core part of the Republican narrative, by the way, that they claim that we were energy independent under Trump, and that somehow the war on energy that Biden has waged, fueled inflation and also set back our domestic energy production. The exact opposite is true. I mean, this is one of the biggest lies of the Republican big lies, which is there's been no war on energy. We've had a very sophisticated and smart strategy towards domestic energy in the United States, and we now are arguably much more energy independent than we've been in decades. A huge achievement by the Biden administration. Crime, which is something that's being discussed quite a bit. We know now from data that crime rates and murder rates in 2023 came way down. And I show this slide because I want people to understand how different crime is in America than it used to be. I mean, this is a startling slide. I mean, violent crime rates in the United States are about half of what they were 35 years ago. This is a huge, again, societal achievement. And even though they bumped up a little bit during COVID, which shouldn't have been a big surprise to anybody, right, given the social dislocation that happened during COVID, crime rates today are a fraction of what they were. I mean, even cities like DC, where I live, where we've had an increase in the murder rate, most cities have had a decrease. We're still looking at a quarter or a fifth of the murders here than we had 30 years ago. We are much safer today as a country than we've been in a very long time. But of course, what we know is that in the red states, the murder rates are much higher than they are in the blue states. And again, this is a debunking of one of the fundamental narratives that the Republicans have about our physical safety in the United States, is that you're far more likely to be killed in a red state than you are in a blue state. And then on immigration, which I'm going to go through quickly because this is a very complicated topic by what's happening now. Under Biden and Obama, we actually had, under Obama-Biden, we actually had a decline in the number of undocumented immigrants in the United States. This idea that we are a party of open borders was never true. And it isn't true today, and it was never true during the last presidency either. And, so, okay, I'm going to come back to that in another way. So let me just recap what we just did, right? Look at this slide. I mean, the achievements of the Biden administration are significant. He took over the presidency in the midst of one of the greatest recessions in the history of the country. COVID was raging. We had an insurrection, and Washington, D.C. was under military occupation basically for several months, an attack on the Congress. And all these years later, right, Joe Biden's central promise to us was that he was going to get us to the other side of COVID successfully, and he has. He's been successful in his first term on the fundamental measure that we set for him when we elected him in 2020, is to get us through this existential crisis that COVID represented. We've come a long way, and think we should be very, very proud of where we are today. But by many measures, the economy today is stronger than it's ever been. And we have to, I think, push back aggressively in this notion of decline that is so central to the entire Republican narrative about the country today. And all of these things I just showed you, right? Falling crime rates, low unemployment rate, right? The wealth creation, the stock market going up, has happened during a period of very significant immigration. So rather than immigrants being the cause of our problems, immigrants have been central to our success as a society in the last 30 to 40 years. It's really important that we don't run away from this basic understanding. I recognize the Biden team has done a lot right. I'm not sure that managing the immigration and border conversation is something they're getting an A on in their grades, but we have to have an understanding that the migration and immigration that we've had has made this country better and stronger. We may be, by many metrics, economically stronger and safer than we've been in generations and potentially ever. And it's in part because of immigration, not despite of it. And it's also true that in our coalition, there's still broad support for economic global engagement, less so on the Republican side. As no big surprise, Republicans have become much more hostile to immigrants, much more suspicious of global trade. You know, Ronald Reagan this is one of the ways that Reagan is rolling in his grave, very pro-immigrant, pro-trade president in the 1980s. And so, you know, we shouldn't, part of the reason our coalition is so open to global trade and immigration is that we have so many immigrants and people with near to the immigrant experience in our coalition who expect this kind of global connectedness that they came here for. So by many measures, life in America today is better than it's ever been. Is better than it's been in a long time, and perhaps better than it's ever been. Let me go through. But our success as Democrats has not just been in governing, it's also been in politics. Since 1992, when the Republicans had won 5 out of 6 elections, some of them by huge margins, we won more votes in 7 out of 8 presidential elections. It's the best popular vote run of a political party in American history. I'm really proud of this. I was part of the Clinton team that wanted to make us competitive in national elections again, and we've been able to do that. This success that we've had is something we can't discount. In recent years, just in the last 2 elections, 2022 and 2023, something very dramatic has happened. When a party's in power, traditionally, the party loses seats. You have a bad midterm, you lose state legislative races, the power erodes from you when you're in power. This is the traditional way American politics has worked. The exact opposite has happened this time under Biden. We've actually made gains in both 2022 and 2023, defying history. It's really a remarkable achievement, and I'm really proud of all of you who've been part of these efforts. 2022 was a great year for us. We gained ground in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, very relevant to what's going to happen in 2024. And then in 2023, we had a blue wave year. I mean, we won everywhere. We won in Georgia, we won in Ohio, we won in Wisconsin, right? We won in Jacksonville, Florida, we won in Virginia, we won everywhere. It was an incredibly successful year for us politically. And Republicans have nothing to show for it. I mean, since Dobbs, the Republican Party, the basic dynamic of our politics is we keep overperforming and having heightened intensity and performance, and they keep struggling. And we even saw it just this week, right? Historically low, incredibly low anemic turnout in the Iowa caucuses for the Republicans, despite spending enormous amounts of money in the election actually really mattering. And then on Tuesday, we flipped a seat in Orlando, and we've come out of the box strong in New York 3, which is the next big fight for us, where the first poll there has us up by 3 points. And so we've seen this constant pattern since Dobbs in the spring of 2022. The Democrats continuing to have heightened performance and Republicans struggling. It augurs very well in my mind for 2024. And if you look back during this period since 1989, right, the country has been a blue country. There have been more Democrats than Republicans for virtually this entire period. It's consistent with the vote that I showed you earlier. This is far more of a center-left country than it is a center-right country, and we should be proud of that, and it's work that we've been able to do. And if what I've said today is true, that since 1989, there's been 3 good presidents and 3 not so good 3 good Democratic presidents and 3 not so good Republican presidents, then that should reflect in the people who came of political age after 1989, right? Which are people basically in their mid to upper 40s and younger. And that's exactly what you see. There's been a huge structural change in this country and what's happened with young people. Young people used to be a swing group. It used to be a jump ball, in the 90s and the early part of the decade. And then starting in 2006, it started really swinging. Young people started really swinging towards us. And this is where we're getting our margins from in elections now. That's why I talk so much about needing to push the youth vote to the upper end of what's possible for us in this election. We are getting our big margins from young people consistently in election after election. And you note that in the two elections where we didn't do well in recent years, and there's only really been two, by the way, in 2010 and 2014 is when we really suffered with young people. So keeping our margins up with young people really, really matters. Getting turnout up really, really matters. And I just want to remind everybody that how important what's happened, since 1948, to put in perspective what's happened in recent years, right? We struggled to break 50.1% as a national party. We did it in 64 after Kennedy's death. But we received 50.1 in 1960 and then in 76, and we got 43 and 49% under Clinton. And in those first four elections of this strong popular vote run that we had, we averaged 47% of the vote. In the last four, since Obama in 2008, we've averaged 51% of the vote, right? The last time we did that was in the 1930s and 40s under FDR's presidency. We're undergoing a remarkable popular vote run as Democrats. The Democratic Party is very strong right now. And it's why, if you see here, we jumped, 4 points from 47% to 51%. And in 2024, I want to jump another 4 points. I want to get us up to 55, and we can talk about that in the Q&A. And why it matters with young people is that the older Americans are becoming a smaller and smaller part of the overall electorate. Winning with young people really matters as they become a bigger and bigger part of our politics. And so let's just a couple more thoughts before we get to Q&A. The warning side note for us, and for those of you who follow OPM, you know what I'm going to say now. Despite this remarkable economic record we've had, Republicans are ahead of us in their ratings on the economy. And this really began in the Biden campaign itself. During the election in 2020, Biden was elected because of COVID. I mean, COVID was the number one issue. We won those voters 3-1. On economy, jobs, right, number two, Trump crushed us in the election. And also in every way that you look at this, right, he was seen as being much stronger in the economy than Biden. I think some of this has to do with the shutdown Democrat arguments, which I think were reasonably successful by Republicans. But Biden entered the White House in a deficit. He had not made a deep economic connection with voters. He had made this connection around COVID. And this is why I think it's so important that Biden can say, look, on the thing you elected me to do, I got it done. Now I got in my second term, I got all these other things I want to do. You asked me to do something, I did it. Now we got these next things, right? This is a powerful framing for us as we head into 2024. But despite all of this stuff, and despite us being in a deep recession during this election, right, Trump was still trusted more in the economy. This is a little bit of an Achilles heel for us that we have to be cognizant about. And it showed up right away in polling. This is June of 21, right? You can see Biden, we're up 27 points on COVID. We're up 20 points on healthcare. We're only up 4 points on the economy, right? So Biden was always underperforming on economic issues from the very beginning. I'm going to skip through this because it's played out. We all know this, right? When is this from? July, summer of 2023. Biden is still down on these economic issues. So we've got work to do here, right? We need to get into a better place. I think that's beginning to happen. You're seeing consumer sentiment go up. We're beginning to get there. But my goal is by the summer is that I want to be even with the Republicans on the economy in order to feel comfortable about winning the election. Trump has very few strengths as a candidate. I think he's an historically terrible candidate. This is one of them, and we have to work really hard to take it away from them in the coming months. So let me just conclude here. We've gone through a lot of data today. I'm sure it's a little overwhelming. I hearken back to this moment in time when I think about the most important thing I can convey to all of you about our politics today. As I go back to this speech given in January of 1941, FDR is now what we call the Four Freedoms speech, of the State of the Union speech, where FDR laid out in a time of authoritarianism and dominion and World War, and now the Second World War after the one that had just come a few decades before, he laid out a new theory of how he wanted to organize the world. He wanted to organize the world around freedom, not around dominion and authority. It was a taking the American spirit and the American experiment and trying to export it to the rest of the world, to give the people of the world the same kind of opportunities that we had here. And in this speech, which became then, these four freedoms became in the Atlantic Charter that happened with Churchill later, later in 1942, in 41 or 42, I'm forgetting, 42, I think, in the UN Charter in 1945, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. These four freedoms were the foundational orientation of the documents that created the modern world that we live in today, this global system that America imagined and built, coming out of World War II. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. So simple, right? So powerful. This is the way the world has been organized. And this is something that FDR gave, the most consequential American, perhaps in our history, gave to the rest of the world, is to build a world based on freedom. It's one of the reasons why I think Joe Biden, in his speech in Valley Forge, so dramatically centered his presidential campaign around freedom. It is the foundational value of the modern Democratic Party. This is who we are. This is what we fought for in World War II. This is what we have been about in all the decades since. And we're going back to, I think, this core emotional place of this notion that we are freedom fighters as Democrats. And it's very, very powerful. And I really applaud the Biden administration for having done this. But what's important to recognize is that world that FDR imagined and that we all built together as Americans during this period has created a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive than there's been during this period of Pax Americana in this American-led global order. We've seen life expectancy explode. We've seen global extreme poverty plummet despite the population growing very rapidly during this period. We've seen more people living under democracy than any time in human history. This has been a golden age, and this golden age that we imagined and built is, I would argue, is the most significant political achievement by a political organization of any kind in all of human history. We've created more opportunity for more people than any other political force in all of world history. I think it's one of the reasons I'm so inspired to be with all of you, is that we're part of what is arguably the most noble political organization that has ever existed, or at least one that's done more good for more people than any other one that we can imagine. And so here we are, though, at a moment when that system that we developed, that's created more opportunity for more people than any other one, is under unprecedented threat. And that's why the Democratic Party that was called in the 1940s to lead the world to freedom is being called again under very different circumstances now. But in my view, not comparable, but certainly something that we have to consider about how central this is going to be to who we are and what we do as Democrats in the years ahead. I think it's really important as we go forward into this election for us to start by reconnecting with the greatness of our past. I mean, look at these things that we've been able to do together here as Democrats in recent decades. It's extraordinary. I'm proud of my party. I'm proud of my president. I'm proud of my country. I think we have done our part to lead America forward and make it better during this period. But the other side hasn't. I showed you through the economic data, they continually let us down and disappointed America. They didn't do their part, and now they've become something dark and dangerous and threatening in a way that no other American political party has ever been in all of our history. We can't look away at this. This is really the defining fight of our time. And I'm very proud to be in this battle with all of you. But I want to remind everybody that when you hear people talk about how things are going wrong in America, that Washington is broken, our politics is broken, right? The two-party system is broken. None of that is true, right? There's one thing that's broken in America, and it's what we used to call the Republican Party, the party of MAGA, who've continually let us down during this period. Imagine if the Republicans had been a successful party, how much further along we would be economically at every possible measure in so many ways, right? It's been their 3 recessions and their international failures, and now their threat to democracy, which has held this country back. It hasn't been the many other things that people ascribe to. And if you need any reminder, let's just spend a second looking at a few photos. Thanks, everybody. Join me in being loud and proud about the good works of this remarkable party that we're proud of, that we're part of. We really all may be together part of the most noble political organization in all of human history. We've done remarkable things before, but we got big things we need to do together, and I look forward to getting them done with all of you. Thanks, everybody. Let me pause to share. And I'm going to go. And sorry, I don't have my normal computer here, so my eyes are going to go up and down a little bit. But let me just go to the Q&A first and just look at some questions. I'd like to try to take questions that are responsive to the data that you see. Let me just say that I don't release the deck. I release the presentation. And if you want, this will be available for anyone to watch. So please share it with your networks and your friends. I do believe the narration that goes with it and the insights is critical to make the data work. Most of these slides, not all of them, but most of these slides and the data here are available in the day-to-day work that I do in Hopium, but just not in this form of this deck. And so if you're a Hopium subscriber, free or paid, you will have access to most of these slides during the course of, because I repeat them as I try to help interpret the world. I mean, many of these slides were in this deck and went to Hopium. Some of them were developed for Hopium and then went into the deck, right? It's all kind of one thing now. And I think that, and so in terms of people who want to follow up with this, what is available for free and for anyone to look at is the presentation itself. And that's what I hope you'll direct people to when you can. Let me just sort of see the questions here and just sort of try to sum up here. Yeah, Tom, Bob Cutner took a shot at me. That's okay. Yeah, let me just, I'm looking at the questions to see if I can sort of summarize them. Let me tackle a couple of these now in terms of the ones I've seen. In terms of the youth vote, I think we have to be very careful to not believe that the Israel-Hamas war has created something kind of fundamental and structural that will be difficult for us with young voters. It's possible, right? It's possible. It could happen. It hasn't happened yet, in my view. I mean, if you look at, much of the really high value, the best polling of young people, the large sample polls, Biden's numbers are close to where they were in 2020. It's, we're below a bunch, we're not where you want to be with our coalition, right? I mean, some of our coalition has wandered and we need to go get them back. And my view is that 10 months from now, when the election in October, when people have to make up their minds, the marginal young voter, the typical young person is going to be thinking far more about jobs and healthcare, climate change, gun safety, abortion, all these, student loans, all these other issues than they will be about a faraway war. I could be wrong about that, right? But it is, I've been doing this a long time, and it's not traditional that an issue like that, where American soldiers are not dying and where there's not American, where American military is not directly involved, for it to become a voting issue for a large number of people. It doesn't mean it's not going to be a voting issue for some young people. And so we have work to do. I mean, I think we have both enormous opportunity with young people and we have some challenges. But that's true in politics all the time, right? I mean, it's always an asset. We all have balance sheets, right? Assets and liabilities. And I think what I have argued in my public writing and in my public commentary is the Biden campaign needs to build the largest youth operation that any presidential campaign has ever built. And what I'm really excited about is that they launched Students for Biden this week. The student part of the campaign, the student part, not the youth vote, but the student part of it, because not all young people are students, right? Has launched and is going. And Eve Levinson, who's a friend and hopefully will come on and speak to us at some point, who runs the youth program for the Biden campaign, is off and running. She's very talented. I'm a big fan of hers. And, things are moving ahead. So, we have work to do. Look, my general view is we should win this election. I hope we win by a lot. But we have a lot of work to do, and there's going to be bumps along the way, but I'd so much rather be us than them in every possible way. Let me just see. And by the way, Gen Z apathy, there is no Gen Z apathy. We've had very, very high youth turnout in 2018, 2020, and 2022. We've had, look, this idea, I want to just, let me address this because this comes up, this is more of a opium thing than it is a with Democrats thing, but the 2016 happened, right? Hillary Clinton would have won the election by 5 or 6 points if the FBI had not intervened in the final 10 days. There was no superpowers by Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't have some kind of magical hold on working class voters in the Midwest. There wasn't Democratic apathy and so on. There was the election changed at the end, and elections can change. I mean, this is the admonition, right? We have to fight all the way through to election day. But there has this, what comes up a lot in my being on Twitter and on Hopium is this notion that Democrats can't take things for granted. We can't disengage. We can't, that there's apathy and the exact opposite has been true since 2018. We've had extraordinary Democratic performance in election after election of all kinds, ballot initiatives, city council races, mayoral races, right, state, Senate, special elections in all sorts of states all across the country. And it's happening again and again and again. And it's independent of any candidate, right? This is a structural thing that's happening in our politics, which is why I think it would be showing up in 2024, no matter who the candidate is. I think it's regardless. The most powerful force in our politics today is fear and opposition to MAGA. It isn't disappointment in Joe Biden and the Democrats. And the reason we keep winning elections all over the country again and again and again is because people feel this threat of MAGA in their lives. And the Republicans keep running as MAGA, they keep losing. And the candidate they're putting forward in 2024 is uber MAGA, super MAGA, right? He's far more extreme and dangerous than he was in 2020. He's not the same candidate. He's far more degraded than he was in 2020. His performance on the stump is far more erratic and worse than we've ever seen before. He's making huge consequential errors in his campaign, like coming out against the ACA, which was just stupid. There was no upside to that and a huge, incredible downside. And so to me, when I look at this guy as a political professional, what I see is a weak and somewhat pathetic and heavily degraded candidate. I don't see strength. I see weakness when I look at Donald Trump. And I'll give you one more example because I know this is what everyone wants to talk about. Let's talk about the information that voters are going to have in 2024 that they didn't have about Donald Trump in 2020, right? Let's just go through the list. Number one is that we now know that a jury has found that he raped E. Jean Carroll in a department store dressing room and that he is a racist and a sex offender. That's a fact, that's indisputable, and that's something we need to be talking about far more. Second is that he oversaw a massive decades-long financial fraud in New York State, and he's been found guilty of that in the civil case. Now, what they're trying to litigate in New York is the penalty. New York State has asked for a penalty of $380 million. Donald Trump is one of the largest financial fraudsters in American history. We also know that it is a fact that a court has determined that Donald Trump led a party-wide insurrection against the United States that is now involving hundreds of Republicans all across the country, including in many of the battleground states, and that he and found him guilty of that. The reason the Colorado Supreme Court made the determination he should be kicked off the ballot is they looked at the facts and determined that he actually led an insurrection against the United States. Next, we know that he stole America's secrets in an unprecedented volume in ways that no one had ever done before in all of our history. We know he lied to the FBI about it, and he's given some of those secrets away to other people. Those are facts. We don't need a court to determine whether or not it was legal or illegal. We know that he betrayed the country in a way that may be unprecedented in all of our history. We also know that he is more responsible for ending Roe than any other single person in the United States, stripping the rights and freedoms away of a majority of Americans. And he's going to pay a terrible price for that in 2024. And then finally, we also know that he's the single most corrupt elected official in the history of the United States, that he and his family have taken billions of dollars from foreign governments and traded them for actions they took in the government. This is an unprecedented level of corruption. His family is the most corrupt political family in all of American history. I've just listed 6 things that people did not know in 2020 about Donald Trump, that they will know in 2024. And it's why I am so optimistic, because I think any one of these 6 things could knock him out. And there are 6 of them. And so we have more ammunition to define him as being unfit, out of the mainstream, dangerous and untrustworthy than any candidate's ever had. And on the opposite side, Joe Biden, He's been a good president. The country's better off, as I just showed you, with remarkable amounts of data. And as a political strategist, I can see our path to victory. I don't know how you put lipstick on the Trump pig. I don't know how you paint his face, dye his hair, strap a girdle on him, right? And turn him into somebody that looks like a presidential candidate, a serious presidential candidate again. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. And it's why regardless of where the polls are now, I think we're going to have a really good election this year. Let me just see if I can go to some additional questions here, because I think I just covered a lot of the stuff that people were asking. And yeah, I know everyone is, I know. Look, the constant refrain here is that, why don't people know all this stuff? Well, look, that's our job. Don't wait for the DNC, don't wait for Joe Biden. Part of the reason I make all this available to everybody through Hopium is that I want to encourage all of you to be information warriors for your democracy, to take responsibility for telling our story, not relying on others to do it for them. I mean, take Kennedy's admonition that it's not, what can the country do for you? What can you do for the country? What can you do for the Democratic Party? Many of you are being very loud by working on elections, and we've been excelling in that. And congratulations to all of you. But now we have this other thing we need to do, is that we need to be information warriors on top of the work we do in elections, in the daily debate, 24/7, 365. And I think if we can do these two things, keep doing our work that we do in elections, and add to that this day, moving these messages and these stories about the Democratic Party and Joe Biden through our networks, whatever those networks are, right? 10 people, 15 people, 2 million people a day, 2 million proud patriots who love their country can take some of this information and spread it through their networks every day. We can reach 20, 30 million people. Tucker Carlson, who was the most influential commentator in American politics for a while, only reached 3 million people a night, right? I think together, those of us who care about our country and love our country can reach tens, 20 million people on our own without paid advertising, without anything else. And so part of what I'm encouraging all of you to do, and I'm giving you permission to go do, is to be an information warrior for democracy. Spread this presentation through your networks. Make sure people see this and connect with the data. And what people ask me is, well, Simon, send me talking points, or how do I don't really understand all the economic data. But my advice to you is pick an issue, a single issue, whether it's abortion and reproductive freedom, or climate change, or economic issues, or crime, or issues around young people. Pick a single issue and become reasonably expert in it, right? Just know your way around it. Study the data, and you just stick to that, right? Spread this information to other people on one issue, because your passion about an issue comes through when you talk to others. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a big believer in, I get asked for talking points all the time. I don't really like talking points. I don't know that that's how we should do this. You spouting things that you don't necessarily really understand that have been given to you, I don't think is an effective way of communicating, right? I think what's effective is you being loud and proud about the things you really care about, and that passion and that intensity comes through to others. It's persuasive, right, to other people. I'm passionate about the Democratic Party and the good that we've done. That's what I do for all of you and with all of you. Pick just one thing, right, that you can stick with, and don't be annoying to your friends, but be committed, be passionate, be intense, right, and fight in ways that are comfortable for you, and start slow and build it up over time. With 10 months of a campaign ahead of us. But we need your voice in this debate. We also need your help in New York 3 and Tom Suozzi. Hopium community has been already working very hard in that race. We had a great new poll today. That's the next thing that we need to do. We just won with Tom Keene in Florida. We did really well in Virginia. We won in Ohio, right? We've had great victories in the last 12 months. But now we have, our next job is to go win New York 3 and take another thing away from them. I think we can do that together. Let me just see if there's any more questions. We're getting close to time here. Thanks everybody for your terrific questions in the chat. Let me just say that Biden, someone's asking here about Biden. Listen, the Biden White House uses some of this stuff. I mean, if you look at the core economic chart that they release regularly, which is the jobs created per month, that came from this deck back in a few years ago. I work very closely with them. They see all this stuff. We all collaborate on this. We share information. And I think that Biden uses a lot of this information, but he's going to use the information about his presidency. That's his job. He has to sell his presidency. It's our job to sell the Democratic Party and what it's done, in my view. I think there's a division of labor here. I don't work for the campaign. I'm a Democrat and I'm a Democratic strategist. And I try to tell the story of our party. Joe Biden's job is to tell his story. So he's not going to use all of these things that I've gone through today. He's going to use the things that where he has to do the number one job of any incumbent, was to explain why he's done a good job as president and why he deserves reelection. And then in the next few months, he has to articulate what he's going to do with his second term. I'm very excited that there's a whole new part of our discourse and dialogue as Democrats that's going to emerge in the next few months, which is what are Joe Biden's big things he wants to get done in the second term? We're going to be able to add that to the ability to say, hey, you gave us one big job to do in the first term, which is to get to the other side of COVID. We're there. Here are the big jobs that we need to do in the second term. I've written an op-ed for the New Republic, which will be out in a few weeks, where I argue that the two big, Biden got us through the existential challenge of COVID in the first term. And to me, in the second term, he has to make sure that we're successful in the next two important existential challenges, right? Saving democracy here and everywhere and preserving as best as we can this global system that's provided so much opportunity for people here and all around the world. But the second piece is that we have to, make sure the planet doesn't warm. And those two things, I think, are the next big jobs for Democrats, right? Is to preserve the freedom and democracy here and everywhere. And with that, by the way, comes a strong economy and strong society and low crime rates and a booming economy and broad-based prosperity and all those things, right? And also make sure the planet doesn't warm and to accelerate the energy transition and to lead a global movement to do that. I think that's, for me, the next two big things we have to do. Part of the reason that I shut down NDN and I launched Hopium was that NDN was built almost 30 years ago to do a series of other things. It had other jobs it needed to do. It needed to make us competitive in presidential elections again. It needed to make sure this age of that the American system was expanded to the rest of the world. A lot of the things that I set out about doing, back in 1996, we've already achieved as Democrats. And now we have these next things. I think we're entering a new political era. We've got these new big jobs ahead of us. And they're daunting and they're serious. And we have to be serious minded about the way that we both run our campaigns, but also tackle these big challenges. And I'm confident that, we've been very successful, as I showed you, as a party. But the next two big things that we have to do, as I write in my op-ed when I close, as successful as Biden has been, it's very possible that the things he still hasn't done yet will be the most important things he does as president. This is a consequential time. We all know that. It's not just consequential here. It's consequential all around the world, in Ukraine and Israel and the Middle East. I mean, we've got enormous challenges ahead of us. We need to stick together, everybody, right? The way they win is if they can divide the center-left coalition. We have to stay together, fight together, keep winning together. And I think if we can, we'll be doing the right thing for the American people. Let me end it there. I'm really proud to be in this battle with all of you. Once you get, once you see this video up, please share it with your networks. Be an information warrior. Start with this, right? Give me feedback at Hopium. Hopefully you're a member of Hopium. If you haven't, please join us there. It's free, and I'm grateful for all the paid subscribers here today because it's your money and donation that allows me to do this kind of work. And have faith, everybody. In every way, to end on this basic note, right? Joe Biden is a good president. The country is better off. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. And they have Trump, the most unfit man to run for president in our history, and a political movement, MAGA, which keeps losing election after election all across the country. In every way possible as we enter 2024, I would much rather be us than them. And I'm also delighted and excited to be in this battle with all of you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.